thank you everybody for joining. This is the first of hopefully many of our webinar and white paper series. We call it UC Insight, and we're talking everything unified communications with more of an educational focus around industry topics. This first one obviously is on people talking about generally why you should go to cloud. We're trying to take a very unbiased approach to this topic because we feel that that's not always the case. We feel that that really depends on the organization. So to get started, the agenda today, I'm going to talk about industry trends. You shouldn't see too many surprises on that slide. Definitions, I'll talk about, at least in our context. Everybody, and I'm sure people on this call are going to have different definitions of what's hosted, what's unified communications as a service, what's cloud. Some people say they're different, others say they're the same. So I just want to frame up exactly what we're referring to in general terms to lend context to this presentation. And then the next to do jump, right? Well, do you move to cloud? Do you not? Do you stay put? Do you wait? Do you move more into an on-site model? So hopefully we're going to offer some tools here that'll help you. And the questions to ask yourself, these are things to start thinking about and inventorying as you're deciding which direction you want to start looking at. Because it's really before you even go out and start looking at vendors and talking to organizations such as ourselves, because we support both premise and cloud-based communications. These are some of the things you're going to want to ask yourself to get your thoughts in line, which will help refine your search and refine your evaluation. And the next section talks about pros and cons of each model, but that's more or less the benefits of each model. And the benefits change as depending on the organization. What might be a benefit, a cloud benefit for one organization might be a detriment for another. So that's the meat and potatoes of this presentation. We're just going to really be talking about the benefits of each. And then last, some tools to frame up some of the organizational attributes that are in favor of a cloud model, or some of the organizational attributes that are in favor of an on-site or a premise-based communications model. So industry trends, right? This shouldn't surprise anybody. Cloud, hosted, VoIP is growing 30% year over year, which is fast and is rapid. It's not as, and this is more of just an observation on my part, not as fast as we're seeing other applications like your CRM or your messaging or other collaboration tools like Office 365 and others. But voice is, I would say it's a bit of a lagger, but it's growing 30% year over year. So it's definitely the 20,000 pound elephant in the room here. So premise is declining 6% year over year. And oftentimes those are the statistics that people stop at and move on why you should drink the cloud Kool-Aid and go down that road. But oftentimes what they don't share, the cloud VoIP or hosted VoIP currently represents about 1 billion in global telephony market share. Premise is about 5 billion. So it's still heavily in favor of premise communication. Analysts predict a 50% split in 5 years. And like I mentioned before, I don't think analysts are taking into consideration perhaps the hybrid, the fat middle we call it. These numbers I think are going to change. 5 years is an eternity in this industry. So, but this is what the analysts are predicting. This is a study that was done by Synergy Research, and we actually stole it from our manufacturer, ShoreTel. So premise is not going away, at least in the we believe in the near future. Others might agree that if anybody that keeps premise is a dinosaur and you're antiquated, that's just ridiculous. Why would you do that? But think about this. What was cloud, quote unquote, cloud years ago, decade plus? It was Centrex. It was your telecommunications carrier setting up a premise or PBX and delivering analog lines and giving you PBX features to analog phones. So Centrex was cloud. So what does this pendulum look like? I don't know. I just think the point here is I don't think everything's going to be ripped out and it's going to go one way or the other. I think it's going to be a nice blend. And so there is a premise component always here to stay, I believe. So again, the definition that we're talking about, what is premise VoIP or on-site voice over IP? It's the classic traditional, right? Generally, a communication system involves a database and call processing, the heavy lifting of the system, communication setup and call teardown. Beyond just voice calls, it could be video calls and instant messaging and other forms of communication. Right now, it's not just voice. Your communications platform expands far beyond voice. But generally, it's a on your network call processing hardware and software. It can be on your network or perhaps in leased data centers that you're using that you have bandwidth connectivity to. We have a lot of our customers that will design a unified communication solution that spans the network, their offices and data centers. It also includes unified communication applications delivered via on-site application servers. UC applications include things like, again, instant messaging or presence, or perhaps your agent, your call control and your agent desktop tools for your call center, things like that. And then generally all of that's connected to the outside world with public switch telephone network access, PSTN, like PRIs or analog lines, or now we're doing a lot more SIP trunking. So we have a nice little diagram here where you can see the orange switches. Obviously we're biased towards ShoreTel, so we use those particular diagrams, but that could represent anything. That could be call processing that's residing on a voice appliance or servers or whatever the particular manufacturer is, or the platform you're using. And we show UC application server, and we're delivering that connected to your network, so we show that connected to a PoE switch. IP handsets with desktop call control, and then we deliver that at your corporate office. We show this as Tualatin as the HQ. Remote regional offices generally are connected if it's best practices, generally over a higher quality wide area network like MPLS, where we can control quality of service and voice and things like that. And then maybe your smaller offices and your regional offices would be connected, just a handful of phones would be connected over maybe a bit more of a robust public internet connection. So I'm talking to you right now on a soft phone that runs on my iPhone on a Wi-Fi internet in Central Oregon that's connected back to our data center, our own leased data center, where we have our mobility application, our PBX, and we also have connection to the outside world with SIP trunk. So on the bottom, you can see the PSTN access or the SIP trunk access connected in. So this isn't rocket science for anybody. This is pretty common. This is what people see when they think of an on-site communication system. Cloud, and again, I threw these terms out here because I'm bundling them all under one umbrella. Hosted, cloud, unified communications as a service, or UCaaS. Basically, again, same components, call processing and unified communications applications now reside in the quote-unquote cloud. Or what's the cloud? It's a series of, hopefully a series, if you're going with the right cloud provider, data centers so you're not installing this equipment on site. Cloud provider should have, again, if we can get into what sort of attributes you should look at when you're looking at a cloud provider, should have multiple upstream connections to the public switch telephone network and redundant network connections and internet connections. Generally multi-tenant topology, so it's a standard hardware, software infrastructure, and then you have multiple images, so your particular organization would be a logical or a virtual image or a tenant that resides on that system. And when you move to a cloud provider, just like when you're moving carriers, you port your number to the cloud provider. They own your main 800 numbers, they own your DIDs, and then you set up call flow, and it's all handled in the cloud and delivers those communications to your IP handsets or your soft phones or whatever communication device you're using on site. Picture of the cloud. This is an example of three offices, a home office and maybe a regional and headquarters office, where basically we're just plugging an IP handset and call control software plugging into the network switch, and from there everything's in the cloud. You have your call processing, your application servers, redundant data centers, redundant connections to the public switch telephone network, redundant connections to the internet. So there's a lot of, depending on the cloud provider, there should be a lot of redundancy built in. I did add one additional element on this slide, and that's a billing engine, right? That's how they make money. They're going to bill you for you turning on or off certain applications or services. They're going to bill you perhaps for long distance usage or inbound 800 usage. So there has to be a billing engine that's integrated with that. So now kind of the meat and potatoes of this presentation. Well, what should you do? Which direction should you go? Because, I mean, you can't walk 5 feet without getting inundated by vendors trying to sell you one or the other. It's an extremely competitive market, incredible amount of suppliers on both sides. So let's just hone in on the benefits of each and how that might be applicable to you, which gets into the questions that you should probably ask yourself. Again, all this is in the white paper too. Is my staff centralized? Or are they dispersed across multiple small branch home offices? We have a lot of, say, hospital customers where you have 3, 4, 5, 6 1,000 handsets at 1 or 2 locations, maybe a couple regional offices with 100-200 handsets, or do we have maybe a lot of offices, 20, 25 handsets distributed across 60 sites. We have a lot of mortgage customers and that fit that bill. So are we centralized or are we distributed? Obviously, distributed smaller offices, I'm giving foreshadowing here, is going to be probably more in favor of a subscription-based model or a cloud model. Do I have a large IT staff? Do I have the IT resources to manage this? Because this isn't a set it and forget. I don't care if it's, I'm again jumping ahead here, I don't care if it's cloud or if it's on site. Unify your communications, and I hope everybody would agree, generally is a pretty highly visible application in your network. It touches everybody. It touches your stakeholders. It touches your C-level suite. It touches your customers and your employees. It's not a storage array or network switch that's sitting in a server room somewhere. It's extremely visible, and it requires a certain level of skill set to manage that, to maintain it effectively, so it's an effective tool for the organization. So do you have the IT? Do you have a large IT staff? We work with a lot of customers out of the Bay Area that are, venture funded and they're growing rapidly and they don't invest a lot in internal IT staff. Okay, well that's probably one mark in the positive column for cloud in that case. The procurement models. Does your CFO prefer operating expenses or capital expenses? This is a traditional. This is like number one. Everybody's talking about, well, go OpEx, don't go CapEx, which is a large capital outlay. That said, though, that's the lines are getting blurred too there, because we're offering a lot of what we call our own unified communications as a service. We'll install UC systems in our customers' data centers or on site. We'll own it, manage the whole thing for them. So and we'll put it under an OpEx model. But generally speaking, that's a real good kind of first question to ask yourself. Regulations, compliancy, that's big, especially as you're looking out into the cloud, things like PCI compliancy when it comes to call recording and others, and HIPAA and things like that. So some cloud providers, that's something you really need to pay attention to, especially when you're looking at the cloud. You have a lot more control over that when it's a premise-based solution. Am I international? That's huge. Does my cloud provider reach internationally? What does that look like? This is a big one for us. Call center, contact center. We do a lot of customers. We're rolling out an 800-seat national call center right now, and this customer wouldn't dream of putting that mission-critical voice and communications application in the cloud. They have to have control over it. It's critical. It's the lifeblood of their business. So we see more and more a lot of the people that are looking at more advanced call centers, they like to own that. Although there's a lot of providers we work with out there, like InContact, which is a cloud-based contact center solution that's gaining in popularity. But that's generally something to ask yourself. Am I growing at a rapid rate? We have some of these mortgage customers of ours that are adding 1-2 offices a week. Do you have the IT resources to handle that? How hard is it to turn up a new office, train those users, provide them the support they need? That's, again, a mark in the column for cloud. Seasonal, that's huge. We have customers that want to turn up services and turn down services. They're seasonal. Well, especially and that kind of blends into the call center side of, well, do I want to invest a lot of money in infrastructure to just turn it off in the summer? Schools, education, things like that. Or do I want to just pay for it as I use it on an as-needed basis? This is really what we consider some of the core attributes that you should probably think about when it comes to on-site, premise, or cloud. The traditional, the mainstay is, do you want to do a large capital outlay? Do I want to go drop $100,000 on a phone system? Obviously, there's leasing models and other things that alleviate that. But generally, on-site, that requires a project, and it's a large capital outlay. Cloud obviously is monthly. I'm not telling you something that probably anybody doesn't know. Cloud's a monthly model, right? And just, I'm going to deviate for a second here. Really getting objective about this is important, because the industry is telling you to go cloud, which in a lot of situations is accurate and correct. But the industry also wants to go cloud because it improves the valuation of their businesses. So keep in mind, understand the motivations out there. A monthly recurring model for a business is a 5x valuation, quite a bit more than a capital outlay model. So just something to consider. Back to the slide. Thank you. This is something big. row number 2, right? And some people will disagree with me. This is, and I welcome that. This is just our observation. I feel we're very big on support and white glove service. I believe you have more control over your support relationship with a premise-based system. Example, you have one vendor implement a premise-based system, the support relationship doesn't work out. You have the flexibility to move on. And they're out there. There are good integrators out there that provide really good support, I promise you. I don't think they're as prevalent as we'd probably like to see that, but they are out there. And they are maybe more boutique. We consider ourselves a bit more of a boutique shop where we understand our customers' business. We understand what makes them tick. We're more of a partnership with them. Whereas cloud, let's face it, cloud, if you're going to have the resources to build out the right cloud model, this is the important piece. I believe there's the wrong and the right cloud model. There's a lot of people that are racing to spin up phone systems in the cloud and start charging you for it. Well, understand who they are. If they're small, that's also a red flag because maybe they don't have the redundancy they need. Do they have the staying power? Do they have the capital to make sure? That's really risky. We saw quite a few years ago a cloud provider stop paying their upstream bills to CenturyLink out in the Idaho market. And there was a lot of people that had phone numbers that were published for many years that were on this cloud provider. These numbers went away. And that was huge. There was businesses that disappeared because of this. So it is a risk. So if you're going to go with the right cloud provider, they need to be substantial. They need to be a carrier. They need to have the financial resources. They need to have data centers across the country. They need to have the right infrastructure, which is great on one side, but on the other side, they're big now, right? So, and carriers are an interesting topic for me, but carriers, take a carrier, right? Maybe some of you have a good carrier. Good today, bad tomorrow. Maybe they get acquired. Carriers in general have a hard time supporting just the basic services they need to when it comes to outages and SLAs and customer support. Now give them a complex phone system to manage. So again, carriers have the financial resources, and larger manufacturers do too. Like ShoreTel has a very nice cloud offering. I know Mitel and some others are doing that, but they're generally larger companies. So you lose that boutique, you lose that custom, probably high-end, high-level support that you loved with your premise-based solution provider. And now you're kind of at the mercy of the cloud provider, right? And you don't have the flexibility perhaps to move to a better support relationship. If things are going really bad and you're in the cloud, it's a lot harder to move. So that would be a benefit of the UC side. Another very common attribute to on-site is increased hands-on IT and maintenance. I mean, that's just it, right? You're managing servers, you're managing patches, you're managing security. You have equipment that you have to manage. And with the right cloud provider, you reduce or eliminate that IT. There are some cloud providers too where the end user just presses a question mark on their phone and immediately someone answers. So all the end user support gets completely offloaded. And that's huge. And so that's a cost to take into consideration when you're looking at these two, because you're going to have to continue maintaining an infrastructure with on-site, with cloud, with the right cloud provider. I always want to highlight that. It's not just cloud in general, just like it's just not premise in general. You have to have the right technology is great, but we're strong believers that you need to have the right partnership backing you. So that's definitely a benefit in the cloud column. Better control over disaster recovery, business continuity. So on premise, every time we talk to one of our customers, we're constantly looking at how do we have disparate network connectivity in case you lose connections to a satellite office? How do we have local survivability? How do we have dial tone redundancy? Say we deliver set of SIP trunks into the headquarters office, and maybe it's another set of SIP trunks into their data center. How do we have a redundant call processing? So we go through a checklist with our customers from an architectural perspective, depending on how mission critical their voice is, and think of every failure scenario. What if we have a geographic disaster? What if we have an earthquake at our headquarters office? How does the rest of my offices function? What do I have disparate relationships with carriers that I can leverage, so I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket? You can get, with the right premise-based solution, you can get very creative and you can get very granular on exactly all the different failure scenarios, because that's something we often see. Not as much now, but for a long time, people would be planning a lot of disaster recovery, business continuity planning, but they wouldn't even think of their voice. They'd still have this 20-year-old Avaya PBX in there that was a single point of failure with like 3 PRIs and one processor, and that was it. So we're always trying to get our customers to think of it, because it is, for many, a mission critical application on your network, sometimes the most mission critical. So we feel with on-site premise, you have a bit more flexibility, where in the cloud, you do have disaster recovery, you do have some continuity options, business continuity options, which I'll jump to in a little bit. For example, one is the very fact that it's in the cloud helps you. If you have a headquarter disaster or regional office disaster, everything's in the cloud. People just repoint their DID to their soft phone, their mobile phone, or their IP phone at their home, or a different office, and away they go. So inherently, cloud has some pretty decent disaster recovery business continuity options, but that's about where it ends, right? Other than that, it's in the cloud. You're relying on one provider. You're hoping they have disparate connections up to the PSTN. You're hoping they have redundant data centers. You hope their failover scenario works. You're kind of just in hope land, right? You don't have a ton of control over that. The things you do have control over is perhaps maybe building into them with maybe an MPLS network for quality service. That's your production circuit into them, and then maybe having a different carrier and an internet backup to connect into them. So you do have some flexibility over that, but generally, when you really want to get granular about application redundancy, called processing redundancy, carry, and all that stuff, we still feel that you're going to have a lot more flexibility on the on-site premise space model. Next, row 5. So changes in the system, right? If I want to add an office, generally I have to add a call processor. I have to add on-site dial phone connectivity and perhaps a server, whatever the particular manufacturer is. It's generally a project, right? It requires upfront investment in hardware, licensing, and software, and pro services. Whereas really with the right cloud model, it's just press a button. It's a consumption model, pay as you go. I want to turn up 5 seats, I want to turn up 2 mobility seats, and I want to turn up 3 fax server seats. Boom, 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 done, and then I move on. So that's a huge benefit on the cloud side. The next piece, this area is getting a little gray too, but generally we have customers perhaps that might have a homegrown SQL database. They want to do very customized database dips in their call center to do priority routing, for screen pops and things like that, or if their applications reside on site, then obviously a premise-based system that's standards-based, that's sitting on your network, you're going to have more flexibility in integrating with that data and those applications. Where the cloud, it's going to have less flexibility. Now, as you move more things into the cloud, though, so another organizational attribute you should think about, do I have a lot of my applications in the cloud? For us, example, we have a lot in the cloud. We have our email, we have our CRM, we have our help desk, all that's in the cloud. So if you have a lot of your core business applications are in the cloud, well, now with your cloud provider, we're starting to see a lot more integration. For example, ShoreTel Sky, the cloud provider, voice provider, now can integrate with CRM, has a really nice Salesforce integration, also has a real nice Zendesk integration. But if we had a lot of those applications on site, then an on-site system might make more sense for us. Specialty applications, we see this a lot where we have a customer, maybe you've got 5 executives that want to roll out mobility, which is the application I'm using right now. With a premise-based solution, generally speaking, you're going to require server, a virtual server perhaps, or an appliance. It can require man hours, licensing. It's a project, right? To deliver a fax server or to deliver mobility, or perhaps you have an executive that wants to spin up a mini call center for whatever the business function is. It's going to be a bit more of a project and an investment on the premise side, whereas cloud, generally with the right cloud provider, you can just, again, turn it on. I want to turn on 5 seats of cloud. I want to turn on 5 seats mobility. I want to turn on 5 seats of contact center. You turn it on and you use it. You're done using it. Maybe the executives leave and that idea fleets and goes away, then you turn it off. So that's definitely a benefit for cloud solutions. And this number 8 is interesting to us. And I haven't seen it otherwise, and people might disagree with me. Generally, if you're looking not at soft costs, because CFOs don't care about soft costs generally, from what we've seen. But when hosted voice came out initially, that was the selling point. Oh, it's going to be a lot less expensive. But if generally, if you're looking at the project, you should be looking at least a 5-year TCO, total cost of ownership. And generally speaking, with premise, you're going to have a tangible less TCO, lower TCO, because I own it and I own it, right? We have customers that have implemented ShoreTel 10 years ago, and they've just kept turning on their support and their software, and they have all the newest UC features, but they're not paying $2,000 a month for that service, or $3,000 or $4,000 a month. Whereas obviously with cloud, you do the math, right? You're paying $2,000, $3,000 a month for 5 years or 36 months, and you still don't own anything. generally there's a breaking point where your TCO is going to be a lot higher on the cloud side. But that does not take into consideration, and this is something you got to also calculate, is IT resources. When you're figuring that out, do I need to add bodies and training to maintain my premise system, whereas I don't on my cloud side? So that is a tangible cost that if you can get your CFO to look at, that would be something to consider as you evaluate that. Some of the no-brainers, hardware and software become obsolete, right? I spin up servers to host my call processing application and my UC applications, servers or voice appliances, whatever the case is, that generally becomes obsolete. Whereas in the cloud, you don't really have to deal with that because that's up to them. Yes, they're constantly making upgrades and they're making those changes, but that's really this doesn't concern you. You just know that you have the latest and greatest all the time, and it's up to the cloud provider to keep their systems up to date and non-obsolete. This is another big one. So you do have, with most cloud providers, depending on the cloud provider, you do have control over things like call flow and auto attendance, and how I set up my voicemail and schedules and some basic high-level stuff, and you're going to have a decent amount of flexibility. But for our customers that have a very specific, more complex needs when it comes to call flow and priority routing and all the other things that they, the overflow and things like that, you might start seeing that fall off on the cloud side, some of the flexibility. Because remember, the cloud provider has under the hood, they have a lot of flexibility, but they're not going to give that to you. You're just a tenant on their system, so they're going to give you, say, maybe you get 70% of the administration flexibility on a cloud solution. I'm just throwing these numbers out here, where obviously you get 100%. You own it on a premise-based solution. So depending on your organization and how unique the configuration system administration requirements are, that might be something to consider as you look at the different models. This is another one. On-site premise communications generally can be more difficult to predict. Your CFO comes to you and says, hey, the business is requiring us propping up 3 more offices. What is that going to cost? I don't know. What's the project look like? How many hands? What about the network? Do I need servers on site? How is that going to look? How many analog lines do I need to connect to? It's generally less predictable. It's less linear, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's doable, but it's less linear, whereas cloud, you can say, how many seats? Well, I'm going to have 10 seats at that office. Okay, 10 times 30 is X per month. Do we need an operator? Are there any call center? Okay, well, that's, so generally a lot easier to predict and budget, which is nice. Premise-based solutions, we are far and away easier to troubleshoot, maintain if you have the skill set or you have the right partner to back you, right? So if we have customers that are having call quality issues, can we get in, look really truly under the hood and look at things like packet loss and jitter and delay? Can we look at, is it a DHCP issue, or is it a SIP handoff issue, a handshaking issue, or are we dealing with why is DTMF not happening, and what's choking out DTMF, and what do the codecs look like? And again, these are things that we have a lot more visibility, and we have the tools to really understand that. Whereas with your cloud provider, they too have those tools, but you'll never see them, and you're going to have to open up a trouble ticket, and you're going to have to escalate to really understand that, which might be just fine for you. But generally, you're going to have a limited visibility in system health. They're going to say, yeah, your image looks good, and it looks like the entire system is done, right? Again, I'm paraphrasing here, and I'm sure people might be shaking their head saying, no, my cloud provider actually provides a lot more in-depth, perhaps. But from what we've seen generally, if you're really wanting to dig under the hood and pick it apart and really understand what's happening, you're going to have more visibility with the right premise-based solution generally, and the right tool set and the right vendor or partnership to look at those things. Upgrades can be more impactful on the premise side. That just requires hardware upgrades, software upgrades, downtime, staff involvement, scheduling outages, etc. Generally, with the right cloud provider, that should be fairly seamless. You shouldn't notice it. Upgrades should be happening if their infrastructure is built correctly, really without your users being affected. So that's definitely a positive in the cloud side. And this is just me kind of talking the backside of business continuity. I talked about this before, where depending on how it's designed, you can build a lot of disaster recovery and business continuity on a premise solution if you lose, say, your headquarters office. You have a geographical or outage, like an earthquake or a global or a significant power outage or something like that. But generally, people put their phone system on their site. Maybe they use that as a hub spoke, and the remote sites connect back into that. I would talk to us. We'd recommend perhaps some other topology considerations. But with cloud, that's kind of just a non-issue. all my sites connecting to the cloud, and my Portland office goes offline, no problem. I just reroute my Portland numbers over to my Phoenix office because Phoenix is up and running and everything's in the cloud. And if I lost the West Coast and I had the right cloud provider, then my image or my tenant should automatically be available in the cloud's New York data center or Midwest data center, whatever the case is, and away I go. So again, if you have the right cloud provider, that's going to be less of an issue. And this is what I was talking about before. This is I'm foreshadowing a little bit into the next white paper and webinar series. But we have a lot of customers that perhaps, whatever the case might be, they have a lot of disparate phone systems. I have NEC at these offices, I have Mitel at these offices, I have ShoreTel at these offices, and maybe there was no standardization in how procurement was handled, or perhaps there was an acquisition frenzy, and now you have all the systems you're maintaining. Generally, we would say let's standardize on that, and let's, from a premise model. But what if you can't? And what if call center is a big part of your business, and you want to have agents perhaps at each one of these offices, and you want them to have a common desktop experience, and you want seamless call routing between offices when people call your customer service center, and you want to start leveraging resources. Well, this is a really great way to get your foot in the cloud world, and that might be let's implement a cloud contact center, call center. Contact center, call center is the old word where now it's contact center because instead it is voice. Now people are expecting to communicate with the organization with web and email and SMS and other ways of communicating. Well, regardless, let's look at a cloud overlay. Let's take all of your main 800 numbers, your customer service numbers, let's port them into a cloud call center. And as long as I can hit your agents with a DID that are on these legacy PBXs, I don't care if this one's NEC or this one's Avaya or whatever the case is, because I'm distributing those to the cloud contact center. All they're doing is ringing agents DID. It could be their cell phone, it could be their home phone, it wouldn't matter. And so now I can have my main 800 number call in. It can ring my Portland agents. If they don't answer, I can overflow to my Phoenix agents. I can do skills-based routing. All my agents, although they have different handsets, legacy crusty old handsets on their desk, now they have a desktop tool that is common across all sites. Or perhaps they throw their handset away and they're just using a soft phone that connects back in to the cloud contact center. So that wasn't really a pro and con. That's just an idea to think about, especially as we're getting into the hybrid stuff. These are the organizational attributes. I think this is a nice slide. It's also, we're doing some blog posts with this infographic, and we're also doing a lot around, this is in our white paper. These are just things, again, kind of that are attributes for your organization. We're just more of a recap here on where maybe cloud or on-site fits in your world. Larger centralized staff and locations we see generally migrate to more of a premise-based solution. Small offices, many offices, decentralized staff, growing rapidly, all of those things are definitely we see those people migrating more towards either our UCaaS model, our Unified Communications as a Service, where we essentially own the hardware software and just lease it out to the customer, or Sky, or I'm sorry, not Sky, that's ShoreTel's model, or cloud. That's generally where we'll see that type of subscription-based model. People are moving in that direction. Like it or not, I'm seeing a lot of larger mission-critical contact center applications that are the lifeblood of the organization. They like premise. I'm seeing a lot of people going off cloud and back to premise too. This 800-seat call center we're rolling out for our customer, they had about 400 or 500 agents on. They tried 2 cloud providers, and ultimately they decided they couldn't take that risk anymore, because when the cloud provider just had outages or they had issues, and again, you're dealing with a larger organization where you're more of a number. You're not getting that boutique, high-end expertise and support specifically around call centers. That's just a whole different ballgame. It's a whole different skill set and expertise. Those people generally migrate to premise-based solutions and then deliver a lot of disaster recovery. We deliver a lot of disaster recovery and business continuity architecture around that. Also, security and regulatory, PCI compliancy, things like that. I see more people leaning towards it's so important, and the ramifications are so big. They generally like to control that. That said, also, if you go with the right cloud provider, that means that also I can just, that's the cloud provider's responsibility now. So again, it all goes back to having the right provider, because they are not created equal. I guarantee you. And if you're making it a cloud decision off of price, it's gonna hurt. Generally, 90% of the time, from what I've seen. So, understanding these things are important, and we can help you navigate that stuff. Obviously, people favor a CapEx model. Well, you're not going to get a CapEx model with cloud, so you might lean more towards the premise-based solution. They want to own it. They want to depreciate it. You know, we see, especially like down in the Bay Area and a lot of our rapidly growing VC-based companies and things like that, a lot of that their adage, well, I just have a cell phone, that's fine. I mean, voice isn't all that critical. We do most stuff with email anyway. Okay, well, you know what? Maybe cloud's a good solution for you if voice isn't as mission critical, and you don't really care about having as much control over that, and you just want it easy and offloaded, and you don't want to deal with it. Cloud's a great solution for that. And if you're already consuming cloud applications, that's one of the first questions we ask when we meet with a potential prospect and we're qualifying is, well, what are you doing in the cloud today? Well, everything's in the cloud. We do everything in the cloud. Okay, well then, generally that model makes a lot of sense for your organization, and you understand the ups and downs of that. And so that would be another organizational attribute that might point you in the cloud direction. Going back over to the premise or on-site columns, I apologize for jumping around here. Very special application integration needs. Okay, Inflow, we want the ability for calls to come in. We want to recognize caller ID, or we want to collect digits via DTMF. We want to do a database dip into our SQL database, and based on that information, we want to collect their account balance and their call priority, and we want to route that call a specific way and prioritize it this way, and we want to deliver to this skill set. And then when it gets to the end user, we want to pop the record and on the end user's computer that has all that information. Or, you know, in Flow, what we want to do is we want to, you know, we have a China office and we have kind of local China dial tone. We want to do a SIP integration to that and tie back across, you know, whatever the case is. Premise, sometimes we have a heck of a lot more control over that kind of stuff. So obviously going back over to the cloud side, minimal or no IT staff, go cloud. That's a real great model. Because if you're on premise, you generally want to have some expertise on site for that, unless you go with a fully managed offering with your telephone system provider. Again, it goes back to knowledge. If you have a knowledgeable IT personnel that really have the skill set, premise might be a better solution for you. Zero tolerance for downtime and service interruptions. If you have zero tolerance, we just heard that, zero tolerance. You kind of lose control in the cloud model too. We've seen it. Our near and dear to our heart is ShoreTel. We love them to pieces, but we've rolled out customers on their Sky Cloud platform, and they've had downtime. There's been downtime, not extensive, not incredible, but you know, what's an hour of downtime or 30 minutes of downtime? Perhaps what does that mean to your business? Absolutely zero tolerance for that. We just lost $50,000 or $100,000 in margin or revenue. Okay, Inflow, well, let's design something a bit more robust that we can control the carrier relationships. We can control the network relationships. You can leverage data centers and call processing, redundancy, et cetera. So getting down to the end of the list here, again, this ties back into application integration and zero tolerance for downtime. Just more complex communication requirements is generally more of a premise play. So then you have knowledgeable IT personnel, you have some staff, you have more control over that. Whereas if it's less complex, not much on the application, I just want a phone, and if it doesn't work for 30 minutes, I use my cell phone, it's okay. I just have like remote mortgage loan officers that we're rolling out, we're putting offices up all over the country, then maybe cloud's more fit for you. Less complex than perhaps cloud is a better fit for you. So, well, hey, I wanted to thank everybody for their time. Feel free to send out this presentation and white paper to anybody you know. We're happy to be a resource for you, and we are, again, stay tuned for our next month when we do our hybrid. We do a whole white paper and webinar on hybrid. That's going to be pretty interesting. I'm excited about that one because I think that's going to open up a whole new world for people that are starting to explore the various models. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.